Oh yeah. Ooh, let's do this. Check it out. Now, let's get into these cabinets. You've been seeing the toe kick. We talked about the easy levelers. Like I say, it's almost $500 worth right here, but the utility. I let Tim get his toe kicks attached at the back wall over the past weekend. And we're going to try to prioritize, this is the sink base cabinet here, but we want to get this up and running and get the water flowing. And so they can move their kitchen operations over, because to get the water flowing, we got to have counter behind the sink to carry the faucet on. And if we're going behind the sink, we may as well go down to the left and the right with plywood for right now while we work out the best way to go about getting the stone that they want. And it'll allow them to choose the location of the island very specifically. We'll put a top on that, and we can move it here and there to where it just feels right. And then you can make a commitment with the cabinetry. We can make a commitment then with the fixture box location so that we're perfectly centered on it, and then go from there. And that's the type of thing that, like, if you bake that stuff in, or little decisions and work happens that kind of force your hand on where to go with stuff by now within the project, then only after you're interacting with it physically do you fully understand what you may or may not absolutely need or want. And then you've got either annoying costs and hold up while changes are made. Even if changes have to be made and you have to work to go backwards before you go forward, that can be annoying. Sometimes the going backward is kind of, really undesirable. And sometimes it's cost prohibitive to make everything just exactly the way you want when it comes to positioning. And frankly, when you're working in the kitchen, these folks really like to cook. It's going to be a huge upgrade to them. There's two things about this project, incidentally, that I think are the biggest facets. For two people who like to cook and use their kitchen together, and she likes to bake and is very talented, I think this is the saddest kitchen. You might be able to agree. It's hardly a cut above an apartment size or scale or in terms of utility, because of the unnecessary steps to cross without it being big enough for an island. The only thing that kind of saves it in this house, which is frankly quite a very nice house, is this island with sink in it and the three-sided top. The stone is obviously a bougie, material, and I'm not running them down personally, right? Because the house they love everything else about this. A very good buy for what they spent, for what it's worth now. And I think doing this now is the perfect time. So anyway, we want to see tons of kitchen utility, not just size increase, not just a nice view out over the sink. And, late in the day, the sunlight coming through all these windows. There's actually more sunlight here after this temp wall goes down. And they have the ability, we could, if they wanted to down the road, a very easy little roof pitch light to add there. In fact, if you're doing one, why not do two or something like that? So this space could continue to become more and more grand. And to be honest, my first thoughts in here, I'm getting really swept away with this, but the first ultra bouge thoughts that I had here, and I'm going to leave it with them at some point to consider when and if they need a roof, because the roof is in very nice shape, especially this back here is going to be on the northern side. So actually, instead of being baked out with sun, it'll probably hold up for the longest portion of time. But someday, if you need a roof and you love everything else about this, and maybe you're even doing a bit of a kitchen facelift or some small changes, you could take this section of this roof and tip it up like a shed dormer and put in a window unit that goes right up into the end of that there, right from here, and you could end up with a magazine centerfold kind of kitchen real quick here. And so there are really big places you could go with the kitchen aesthetically, but we want to see the functionality increase monumentally. And I'd be remiss if there was an extra half step or an awkward, sometimes in some ways it's not this specific, but the distances to things, this in my view is a bit annoying, to constantly walk over and have a half step to this, and then over to the sink is another half step, and then right back here is another half step. In fact, that might be ideal right there, but you want to notice that that's what your body does, and you want to live with it for a week or two at least, and find out if it wouldn't be, it just seems far away, or maybe we could back it off some. So we're kind of stuck with our clearances. Now, this isn't as big as the island is, but we're stuck in these passages here. I kind of like to see this one equal to that one, or you kind of pick one to be sort of significantly different. I suppose there are circumstances where you'd be just a little bit different, but I, couldn't necessarily think of them right now. So that's one of the big facets of this project. And the other big facet, while we're on the subject, is the fact that this door comes from the garage, and it's kind of the back door. There's the front door, but everybody comes through the garage when they come home and everything like that. And this is where they leave off boots and shoes. And so obviously opposite the laundry, we use the front door for company and occasions, because this is more of a utility room, even though it's a really nice utility room. There's certain personal stuff on the laundry machines, and not enough. This is actually really good right now, but a lot of times the shoes are coming out in your way here, and it's just unhandy. And we're going to try to improve that by making this dining room, taking it away, giving them a pantry here, and putting another door from the garage here, so that this whole area can be entryway tile. And he can go along this room with mudroom kind of cabinetry, and even maybe there between the windows, kind of the same thing, bench with cubbies and some upper stuff and places to hang coats right along in there. And you can come in from outside, and then you can come right around with groceries and put them away in the pantry if it makes sense, before proceeding through to your new kitchen. And I'm hoping, it is a bit of a hike coming home to this location from this location, but I don't know that it's all that big of a deal. Dining will be here now, and living room here now, and you could kind of overflow kitchen into that space, or grow living room into that space a bit. It's kind of a universal catch-all rear entry kind of a space. So, you never know. If she wants more kitchen and starts doing more baking and stuff like that, and she wants another work surface over there, totally available to them. The studio or, office and stuff staying the same. This half bath and this stairs being, turned up to match some of the things that we're doing. So the improvements, I think, in the end will be how functional it is in this kitchen, as how beautiful it is, as well as how beautiful, and that experience of coming home and the looks that you get when you come through from outside, and it being, in a lot of cases appropriate to host from that angle and from the front door, and have it all make sense just inside the house. And when you get back here, more of an open plan with the family room, and with the carpet upstairs, with the stairs that switches back, and the doors only starting to lay out down the hall. The open plan isn't going to give them some of the problems that, the noise and privacy problems that you get with a differently laid out house. And obviously the yard and the pool and these other investments that they've made since they moved here, it can be more appreciated just in the day-to-day life, since you're pointed in this direction, where before it was really more about living in this area here. So that's the type of thinking that we're doing during this project. And as far as trying to decide when to move their kitchen operations into this room, I'd really like to put drywall board up and do the areas with mudding that need to be finished, and get them to that point, because then we can get the dust to stop. And I really hate to park all the boxes here and have to cover them as we're making sanding dust and then uncovering them and everything. It's kind of not desirable. The truck's at the shop, so I can't get any more drywall. And I was careful about how much I did get initially, because I wasn't thinking we'd need to keep going up the wall. So today I'm going to finish attaching this around the bottom for now. A 4-foot course will do this here. I'll see if the 1 foot that came off of these 3-foot rips is what we need there. It looks like it might just not be quite enough to get us from the 4-foot rip to just add what we had left over. That would be nice. It might do that, but then again, might not, because that'll be 9.5, 10, 11, maybe a 12. Oh yeah, because the window trim will go through there. So that one 12-inch rip could go up at least there and be cut flush, or actually no, it should keep going, shouldn't it? So there's some more stuff that could get done here. Obviously still got to put the vapor barrier up there still, which I've got. I can't get more sheets though. And if I can make my peace with, this joint across here behind the cabinet doesn't need to be sanded. They'll probably make me tape and mud it so I could do that, but there doesn't need to be any sanding dust there. And this needs to be finished to the ceiling. That's where the finishing drywall area is. The biggest one, actually, kind of more complicated one, has to happen right there. If I could get that done, when I was happy with that, then I could commit to these few cabinets here, get the sink in there, get enough countertop on to put the faucet in, and get them up and running in here by the end of this week. So at the latest, I want to start tearing this kitchen out of here early next week. It'd be great if we got part of Friday into taking cabinets down and stuff like that, but first this stuff has to go somewhere, and if it's going to go somewhere, it should go there, and if it's going to go there, I've got to be a lot farther along than that. The vet, I got to go to the vet tomorrow morning, and I got a production meeting in the afternoon, so I won't be here the second day of this week. And another day I've got to get the truck, which is in the wrong direction from this job site, so that'll chew up part of the day going to get it, just so I can use it to get sheets on the way here, to get the sheets that we need to put up to keep moving with this middle section. So these are the constraints of being a one-man show and a sole proprietor operation. Chris thought he might be able to work Thursday, and if I haven't got something for him to do here, I should take him up on it, but I should stay home and get stuff done around the place, which would pull me from this week again. And so this is how the cookie crumbles. But for now, let's get in. And we're back. We're just blocking this area not only for this kitchen design, but it wouldn't hurt to provide for any type of shelf bracket in the future in the event that somebody wanted to use a different type or have a different orientation to shelf brackets. Even if they wanted to go to cupboards, this wouldn't hurt. And so, you know, we made the investment here without knowing precisely where we're going to place the brackets. Since getting started, I had the opportunity at the desk, since I'm a one-man show, to show a 3D model of the couple different bracket versions that we were down to deciding between and their orientation and the different looks that creates. And we essentially decided on something that, you know, what I prefer and the customer prefer, very similar, and certainly the same SKU, same bracket itself, and it required the same quantity. So that was a happy, you know, discovery. We could get them ordered, we could get them in here, and then whether we move them in or out a little bit between their preference and mine. I have some gut feelings about things sometimes that people go, oh, now I get it. Sometimes they, you know, are into what they are into, and that's fine. Sometimes, often enough, I see what the customer is seeing, and it, you know, I don't have to have things my way, right? So, however, because of that order, we wouldn't probably need this inner blocking, or this inner blocking. I guess that's blocking two now. You stuck just a 2x4 in there. So a ripped 2x4, a ripped 2x12. It probably was down to closer to about 2x8. A couple cross cuts there, a couple cross cuts there. You know, well, in the end, I'm going to head that off when somebody's like, well, didn't need all the blocking. It's not going to hurt anything. I do it in closets. I do it on the stairwells that I've framed, so that anywhere you want to go with a bracket to hold something, you can just screw right into the wall. None of those toggle bolt, you know, that toggle bolt crap. You can get good enough R value out of 2 inches of XPS behind it, and we'll even put a little bit in these areas here, you know, quickly before we close this up. And so now these have been pinned. This is the elevation. I guess it's on the plastic for this one. This is the bottom edge of the shelf, the lowest shelf. So we have a cavity in the wall behind that through which to enter into the thickness of the shelf to, you know, energize the lighting. And in these other 2 locations, the shelf is there, the shelf is there. There is, you know, space behind there in the event that it becomes necessary. And we do know that the shelf brackets are J brackets, and so the flange goes up the wall, which it'll be nice because if they want to do any kind of backsplash here, we won't have brackets under the shelves in this corner sticking down onto that and having to move out, or having to, you know, have the backsplash finished around them, or forcing the backsplash elevation down because of the bracket. Yeah, you just want to think about all of these things, right? Because we've got a plan here, and we don't want to back ourselves into a corner and not realize, you know, the difference that may make. So considering all of that, I'm actually going to get right back into, I fastened to these, they're just toe nailed into the stud. I'm going to put these in, this, and these. Fix up the insulation a little bit, staple up that lower course of vapor barrier. We can roll the old vapor barrier back down the wall, and actually there's some here too. So we just have a little bit more vapor barrier to then add, and I'll put a little insulation in below there. We're only going to put 4 feet in here, so that area above will be available to work in to finish up the plumbing of the hood and stuff, right? But for the most part, we're working our way up here in you know, in an effort to get to a point where we can kind of put this kitchen together enough so that they can move it over here. And I've said all of that, but then I'm going to put some plastic over these openings, and the bubble will move like to here. And the way that's been kind of more of the construction zone, of course, this is overflowed here, but we're going to move back to here. So, you know, if they are cooking and different things like that, they'll have to be in the kitchen in the evenings, but then they'll have to move most of the stuff out or into the cabinet boxes when they're done. And we can put like a skirt up, right? So we can tape on, after the drywall's up, we can tape plastic that just falls up over and down the cabinet boxes, and even throw some plywood on top of that, or vice versa. But they can be walked down at that point and used almost like scaffold for some of the work that we have to do above, because it's just the way that we've got to work here. I can't take their kitchen away for weeks and weeks now just for the comfort level that I would have in, finishing the walls completely and then moving the cabinets in and all of that. It's just, it's time to try to get this set up and functional for them. So it's not the handiest thing from a builder perspective, but there are other factors than the builder's perspective. So we're going to move out in that direction. But for now, I got to finish this corner up quick. So I guess we will do a drywalling video probably by the end of this. I got ahead of myself. If you were going to work in the right order, you wouldn't have installed the outlets. You would have roughed in the wiring and folded it up, pushed it to the back of the box. And then in putting this up, we could have, followed those with the drywall router, but with the vapor barrier that we're doing, and some of this other stuff being machined in anyway, I was going to want to drill these precisely, so it ended up being no problem to just lay it out as you've seen. Also relatively new construction, even though this wall is actually out of plumb, half an inch or more. It sits out. What was I getting at? We could still square down and use the sheet on the floor. And as you saw me, using the squares and stuff like that, measurements, plotting out these locations, cutting them out with some level of, accuracy. And then the covers and stuff are pretty forgiving. I had to use Tim's Artist's T-square because I've forgotten twice in a row now to bring my drywall square, but that's, working just fine. But here's a situation where I was just about to put this piece up, and since I weaseled this box in through the existing drywall, I wasn't sure whether we were going to take it away or not. Now we've come to take it away, and I'll tell you why in a second. The little ears at the back that anchor the steel component to the stud and allow you to continue to walk the box in and out, to dial it in perfectly. I cut them off because there was no way to get this thing physically through the opening in the old drywall, and I didn't want to make a bigger mess. But I'm actually going to take the time now to go get a box that actually still has them, because I need to have this kind of attachment needs to be strong enough. These are loose, but it still won't help us in this case. Nothing worse than something like this that you can't fix, because you try to reach in and screw to the stud after you're content with the level this is at, and you can't get through the steel, and you're drilling it and you're monkeying all around. So we'll just get the right thing real quick and come back and do what we got to do there. Pop that piece up, then we'll pop a rip in here, and doing it that way. See, this was more than 8 feet, so when I initially put an 8-footer in, I knew there was a little bit of piece, that left over there. That's an annoying butt joint to have to do just because the sheet isn't long enough. So I thought, well, I'll get 10s. But 10-foot was going to get us to a stud, but it wasn't going to quite close it to the window. So we'd have a weird seam going right by the window trim, which you don't want. You really want to get lined up with the edges of the window opening, and then you can do a simple butt joint here. So going that far ended up being greater than 10 feet. Then I started thinking, actually, if I were to butt it up right in this area where the stove sits, that will likely be tiled or pretty much definitely tile. And then the hood is here, and the hood enclosure, the faux kind of box that we'll build around it, is going to go from here to there, which will make the rest of this seam a non-issue. There'll just be this little short butt seam above and below where the window trim will get the rest of it. That's ideal. Over here, all of this will be obstructed by the hood, and there will just be, this little seam here, this little seam up and over to there, then the seam work around here. I'll kick through that real quick. So, trying to be smart here. And so we came down this edge here. We'll do the same thing over there with an 8-footer, and then we'll jump across the top and below with the green board, which is the mold resistant drywall. It won't hurt to have it right there over the sink. And we're also going to put the straps around to these joists like they want for the inspection, just probably every 4th one or something, I think it is. And then we can put a rip of, this is 30 feet. So I got 4 sheets of 10-foot long drywall. This, I used the 10-footer to get here, but cut it a little bit short, by the way. And so the other 3 sheets, when ripped in 24-inch wide rips, can go along below and above, below and above, below and above. To do all of this, we're going to put hardwood cladding on this to represent most of that beam, as well as finishing down this column. When we're all done, it should look pretty sharp. So this 24 inches that would only fit to about here is no problem. And this is almost exactly 24 inches, which will work out nicely in that case, making this our only drywall seam to deal with this whole beam swap situation, right? Because we're going to clad the pole or the post with millwork and stuff as well. Now down here we are going to have something to deal with, but I've asked them to really think about this, but they want to take this closet away, which will make this the outside corner. So once we're done doing this demo, we'll put some drywall here and go, get it into the ceiling and over to the wall there. So that'll probably be a little bit later on as far as putting the drywall up, but not too much later on, because I really don't like to leave. It's nice to get through all the drywall mudding and sanding and prime and have that be the end of that, because the dust gets everywhere. It gets onto everything. It can't just be blown off. Everything has to be kind of cleaned and scrubbed. So, we're going to try to avoid that. But I did have them take all of the boxes and toe kick and stuff out. We're just going to bite the bullet here and get through that much. And then we'll bring that stuff in. That way we're not dealing with cleaning up every day before they can go into using it at night. So, I say one thing, I do another. You're just going to have to live with it. I'm just trying to make this handy on these people and, as handy as possible. And so we've actually changed our mind on what would be handy now. So I'll run out and get that box. I think there's something else I could probably snag. And then I'm going to try to put the rest of this drywall up today, the board. But the straps are in the other vehicle that I left at the shop when I picked up the truck that had been fixed, and left them that vehicle to get some service. So now next week I'm going to have to get that back. Then I can get the straps, put them up, and then I can get the drywall hoist out onto the site, put the lower pieces up, probably with that thing, and then the uppers can go up edgeways from the ladder. That should be no problem. But I'd like to finish this stuff that's like floor level today. So let's see if we can't get that much done. Well, there you have it. We're going to get started and loft the opening of the range hood exhaust fan just to a smaller rectangle, and then we'll put some sticks through the corners so that the whole thing is kind of a tapered prism, and then it can just be measured. The sides can be measured up. Probably use pre-finished plywood for that. That means all this drywall seam will just be taped here. This would just be taped because it'll be tile. The horizontal one all the way around, right at basically where the counter lands, will be taped. All the verts below that would just be taped. The inside corner needs to be finished nicely. I guess this little area right here needs to be finished nicely. This needs to be finished nicely, and that needs to be finished nicely, and this needs to be finished nicely right here. But then back to just being taped on account of the cabinets being here. A nice finish just here where it peeks out before the window trim and after the cabinet, so just a tiny bit. A little bit of finishing there. Nothing across the top because they're going to have wood and trim like crown in here. And a little bit of finishing here and here before the cabinets start again. Again, the window trim happening there. And this probably just taped. That just taped, and because it'll be a tile backsplash. And then over here, we're behind the refrigerator, so that just needs to be taped, and again against that ceiling. So really not a lot of areas that need to be finally finished in here, which is nice. Again, the inside corner up there against the wood and crown won't need to be finished. We'll probably just tape it, and down here we'll end short. Here we'll end short because that's going to be clad with wood. We'll do the joint. Right here is going to be nice, long, as nicely finished as we can do it. Working upside down is kind of a pain. One of the tricks that we'll use to bring that in really nicely is we'll repaint the whole ceiling in one go when it's done, and we'll do it with a very low sheen ceiling white, or likely it'll just be Prep Right Pro Block from Sherwin-Williams, which I think makes a really nice white ceiling. And we got to open this up, and we're going to scoot. I don't think we're going to take that switchable circuit and put it back together. We'll probably just extend these, one or the other, and go to the center right over the sink right here and add a circuit there, just so that when you turn those on, bam, over the sink has got its own, probably a little mini pendant to go with the bigger pendant that's over the island, I think would be nice. And if we're going to do that, the other thing that we could do is try to, if that's going to be on a center low, and then we could see where this one is, and we could take that one over to that location instead, which might make it nice. We'll have to back out from the space and just look, but I'm thinking that for it to be right there, it's kind of ugly. It would make sense if that was here, down, up, shoot. So do a little operating in the ceiling, but that'll just need to have access panels cut to see what we're doing, put the pieces that we took down back up, and then just mud, those seams. So all of next week we'll be doing that stuff. For right now, we're going to have a little holiday weekend. My wife and I got married last year on Halloween, and that's coming up next week. So we do a little something for our anniversary, our first anniversary maybe this weekend. Have just a nice little family weekend with baby Hank. His first Halloween, get a couple pumpkins. We've had friends every weekend for a while now, and it's been a lot without sleeping with the baby and everything because everybody wants to meet him, and it was summer, fall. But I think we're going to just relax, and I'll be back here next week, so I'll see you then. We're back. Today we're just going to backfill with a catalyzed mud, hot mud, that we'll set up, and then the moisture will dry out of it over a short amount of time thereafter. And then we'll tape with air dry mud, an all-purpose over here. So we've got the classic green. It does a nice job of taping, but I like to backfill. I've got areas where, obviously there are gaps and different things like that. We'll just make it all one plane. We've got the little, factory edges that are low in some cases. If this has got a factory edge and this doesn't, that's a weird low-lying area. And, as much as it seems like that, it would be a help to have, and it is in some cases, I like to, in a situation like this, make the whole thing flat and then add my tape to that, because drywall in the end is an illusion and an illusion of smoothness. So, we build up mud in these joints with tape in it to create that illusion, but it is in fact got a small hill to build up and over top. And if you are starting unevenly, sometimes it throws me off, and even though I've got a nice blend, it's still visible. So I like to do backfill in this case. So we'll use the hot mud first, and then we can go right out on top of that with taping and all-purpose, both of which will mix up, and we'll probably put a little bit of soap in the all-purpose to keep it from holding the surface tension of little bubbles that end up making it pock-marked on top. And then we'll leave it to dry. And it'll be great because it's a dry time of year. We've got forced air, and they like the house kind of over 70, like 70, 71 degrees. So I have that off right now because I don't want to work in those circumstances. But I'll get everything up on here, and then we'll turn the heat back up, and I'll leave it, and it ought to do a nice job of drying out for us. Meanwhile, I've got to get the hardware in the other vehicle that they said was ready. So I'll get those straps tomorrow morning when I pick that vehicle up. I'll put those up, and I'll probably bring the drywall hoist and put the sheets up on this area tomorrow, leaving this to continue to dry. And then, I might even try to tape that because I've only got to tape this. So if I were to put the sheets up, the straps up, the sheets, and tape that seam tomorrow, that would be a lot of great progress. And then I could come back to the next day and work with a lot of, some confidence on this here and knowing that it's dry. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We better get started. Something I should mention is because I have the outlets and stuff in here already, I got a roll of carpet protection that it would stick to your carpet for a job site that you were going to come and go a lot as a construction professional, and you didn't want to get a bunch of filth or anything into the carpet. It's just a big sheet of temporarily sticky plastic, and it's in the paint section or whatever, with the ram board and everything. But you can cut it to fit, and it sticks really well. But you can also see everything, and you could plug through it and get power, and you could kind of see, like I say, unlike painter's tape and several pieces of painter's tape, sometimes that can lift and the edges can get floppy. But once you get this stuck here and mushed to everything, it's actually got a great adhesive that will stick more actively while you need it, and then let go just as well as, if not better than, painter's tape. So those won't have any drywall dust or filth in the little cracks and crevices that will show up, or without, they won't need to be scrubbed. Another thing that I did was I checked for plane with the face of the jamb, and all the way around this window, we're in nice shape with that. It's a little low right there, but here's nice. Over here, we're good on the right-hand side, but on the left, we're actually kind of low. So I've taped that with painter's tape, and I'm going to float that with mud, probably hot mud, and try to get that to come in a lot closer with this initial pass. And thereby we'll have an easier time of trimming and all of that. So that'll get done at this stage. All right, now we should get busy. 'tis the season for New York apples. That went pretty smooth. I did notice that I forgot to pre-fill one joint, but this didn't quite fill as high as I wanted it to, and it's just hard after a certain point to continue to get things the way you want when everything's soft. So I'm gonna make a little more hot mud next time, put a little more in there, get that done. But for the most part, fairly pleased. And there, you know what I might do is, since we're putting this up, I'll get all that up and then make that hot mud. See if I can't backfill where I need to at the ends and do those couple things. And so altogether, no big deal. Everything else has gotten taped with the multi-purpose. Works great. So sticky. Everything's set in there really nice and smooth. And it impregnates that paper tape really nicely. And some people like to pass the tape. I could have come a little bit closer to that. But I haven't had a problem with leaving it a little bit short in some cases. Some cases it's overlapped. But for the most part, we'll be all right in those situations. If you do it all the time, you've got, the way that you like to do it. It just sort of, especially in renovating, the levels are different. And sometimes you're trying to do a compound curve with 2 layers of tape and you just want to stay away from it. Here's nice and flat. So I pulled out and over it. And I'm taking the opportunity too to just, push the envelope a little bit. So much of this won't be seen. So I get a feel for stuff while I'm in the moment. Trying to pull this all the way through the whole way was too much. It ends up getting too wet before you've got it sitting into the mud far enough. And I just wanted to get a feel. I knew that, but I just want to get a feel for, what the problems can be. So I lifted it in a couple places and pulled it back out and smoothed it. It had a little bit of a wiggle there. But, by and large, fairly straightforward process here. So we're going to get this area right tomorrow. And from there, we'll identify the areas that will be seen and focus our efforts making those nice and smooth. So these Simpson straps were special order. They're medium duty rather than light duty. And, the step up from the light duty strap, which you're accustomed to or should be. But these are on the shelf at Lowe's and Home Depot or hanging up in the structural section with the rest of the Simpson stuff, built for 1.5-inch material as well as the whole layout, where this whole layout falls like really close to the edge. It's going to split it out of the edge of 1.5-inch material. It's really heavy and thick, and it's going to be difficult to bend. And I just think that it's massive overkill with, what was, necessary here. It was something off the top of the architect's head as a suggestion when he opened up his catalog to look. And I think he just got the M version, the medium version versus the L version or whatever of the part number, incorrect. So we're going to go with the regular light version. The nails are going to be in shear, and there's not really going to be an issue here. So I'm going to snap a line because it'll help me. I'll snap it on the bottom edges of all the joists. But if I set these ends to the snap line and nail it in so it's flush on either side. Then I can just come out here and bend it, and every leg that bends up the front of the beam will be about the same length, and it will also be control versus putting it on like that. I'd have to plot these edges out here and try to get it perfect so when it folds, it doesn't run off, right? So we'll be smart about how to put these up, and we'll get them up. Well, that's that. I'm not going to put any screws through the center It's just a skosh wider. It's 24 inches instead of, a 16-inch span or 14-inch span, 14 and a half, what have you. It's a little bit greater than a typical span in drywall, but it is ½ inch and it is the ceiling. It would be impossible to put one right, a row of screws in the center because those steel straps extend 2/3 of the way across this. So really going down the one side at 6 inches or something away would be stupid and wasteful and, time consuming to do something about it. So that will be all the more, attachment it'll get is over a 24-inch sort of distance, right? So I also chose not to put that small piece in this area at the top of this column. It's bad enough that we have one seam at the top of the column. We don't need another one there, so we just do what we can. It wasn't, my thinking wasn't based entirely on this column, or I may have put a piece, right in the middle, or put the notch right in the middle of a sheet so you're nowhere near that fitment with a seam. It's not the end of the world. However, I was trying to mitigate butt joints, and this was the way that I thought I could get that done. So anyway, thinking about the way that you choose to make pieces has consequences. I don't think we're going to pay the price or anything here. However, I'm also not going to put hot mud up just yet, because as well as in this seam all the way along, the butt joints will need it, and thereby the butt joints will need it on these sheets above. So I may as well just make one batch of it, hopefully, and get away with making one batch and putting it all up together. I made a boo-boo down there. I notched the wrong edge. I wanted the cut side to go against the cut side of this ½ inch, so it's fairly planar. I put the factory tapered edge over here, which will be well underneath the wood that the hardwood that we're gonna apply to that beam and make it, and to highlight it later on, and it won't be a problem that it's angled because we won't pull tightly to that. We'll pull tightly to the flat section that's back from there. So rather than having to backfill, we'll just do it that way. The notched piece that I mismade as a result, I did set it right up over here. I just cut it as though the piece was going to turn and go up, which would have put the back side downward. So I had to cut it at the floor, and so now I'll just cross cut it here, and I'll use it to start us down there so that in doing so, our seam will be here-ish, and then our seams will continue to be kind of staggered, which will continue to create, actually, I want to think about that, whether or not to line the seam up, right up and around, pros and cons. There's time and energy spent getting that done because none of these are complete 120-inch long pieces. Because if you think about it, when you set a rim joist at the outside of the second floor and you start on that and you go to 16-inch on centers all the way down wherever you wind up, then there's that last joist, and then there's the rim joist that's basically placed on the outside, flush to the outside of the framing of the house. So the distance in that last one varies on how far of a distance you're framing, which they're normally round numbers, right? But it doesn't divide equally by 16 inches. So a 30-foot long home with a rim joist to rim joist outside dimension of 30 feet. By the time you do a 16-inch on center layout the whole way, what I'm getting at is there isn't a stud or a joist, anywhere to fasten right on the edge of this surface. It's outside by the thickness of the wall in both directions, if that makes sense. So anyway, it's unlikely that there normally is a nailer there to carry the edge of the drywall sheet that has to go up, but basically neither end of a situation like this is going to be on a layout with the rest of them. Thereby, you can't just put up any of the round numbers like 120 inches or 96 inches or anything that, stuff comes in. That's when you put up the 8-foot long 4x8 sheets of subfloor and you start on the outside of the house. Well, those could just continue to fall on the layout of the joists. So you don't have any custom cuts when you put down subfloor. You just bricklay it back and forth across the surface, leave the ends a little bit long, and then slice it, flush. So anyway, we can't come in here with any factory lengths, put them up starting at the wall, and have the end of it land on the middle of a typical layout stick. It's going to have to be custom cut. So even though this is 30 feet nominally, I ended up with another butt joint because I didn't actually cut. What could I have done? Yeah, it really was nothing I could do in this situation. So rather than having 3 10-foot rips nominally into a 30-foot space with just the 2 butt joints, you have a third butt joint, annoying. So for all you geeks and nerds that are trying to plan everything to avoid, to mitigate these joints and mathematically plan everything all out, you've got your work cut out for you. A friend of mine built his house, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And he's an engineer, and he wanted his proportions, he started out early in the process thinking he'll make it so that basically whole sheets of drywall, like to mitigate cross cuts and stuff like that. And I started thinking, like, I think you need to do a little bit of drywalling to figure out or to understand the complexity that you're accidentally making for yourself by trying to make things simple. So there's a lot of blather about that. I am going to put these sheets edgeways, first, then mix up some hot mud and fill in the gappage. And I'm going to get some photographs of these straps because I'm not going to parade the town in here again just to see those. They can take my word for it or look at the pictures because I want to keep moving on the board and mud situation in here. So I guess we better get back to I'm not calling Tim out at all because he's been super helpful, and most of all of his work has been excellent, as good as my work. He's particular about what I'm asking him to do, and when he knows what I'm talking about and he gets it right, it's all good. He's a craftsman, and it's been a pleasure working with him. And that is the ideal scenario when customers want to do some of their own projects, right? I mean, he's built all his own kitchen cabinets. That's great, as long as it works out. It's bitten me before, but there's a small detail here that I need to mention, though, because it's not his fault at all for not realizing. But if you shoot a toe nail, if you toe in a nail like that, and you're too near the end of the stick and stuff, the way that he is, it makes it difficult. See, that nail head isn't flat, and it is going to interrupt the drywall. And trying to push it down by hammering it will, break the stick back, because there's nothing quite behind it, and trying to push it in with the nail set will split the stick again because it's too near to the end with all the mass of the nail's head. So you really want to be down lower. You want to be more like in this position where he was here. Let's see if I can get that back in there. Wow, it's a good fit. Cabinet makers fit there too, which I can be guilty of sometimes. Although in this application, that's exactly the right fit. It's because it was on an angle that didn't want to sit there. Anyway, he has the nail in there, like that, or he did, and you really kind of want it here. Right out the back of this thing is even fine. Anywhere like right there. And then it could be driven up with a nail set, and it would sit, below the plane of this surface, and we could drywall it. So at this point, I'm just going to drag them out of there quick. There's 6 of them or something, 7 of them, and replace it with a construction screw from a lower point, and just from the side as well. In this point, because at that point it doesn't have to be planar. And in those choices, those small nuanced choices, he's got his pencil marks on there, so I'll go right back to those. So he's done a lot of the work here. It won't be that big of a deal, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But you want to realize that if someone's helping you or you're doing your own project and stuff, you want to notice and not be blind to what's coming down the path. Not that Tim was, but it's just a good teachable moment here where 90-something% of what was necessary here has been done, and I can just keep moving. But that's going to cause us to backtrack just a little bit, and also we want to have that redundant stick right at the actual edge proper of the sheet that it's gonna, that's gonna cover it. Now down here, you could say that again. Maybe I'll stop right on the center line of that stick, but in all likelihood, although I don't know if that's a full 10 feet. Anyway, I'll see where I land there with the half, with the end. I'll either have to be on the center line of that stick or onto this beam enough to hold the edge down. And if I'm somewhere in between there, I'll have to cut it back to the center line of that stick if that's all the farther I can reach with a 10-foot sheet. But those are just details. Otherwise, you could just and you'd be covered and onto the next step, right? So on days when, you've got a little window to get to the next kind of flag in the ground and get all the hot mud on these cracks and stuff and walk out of here leaving it to dry, you know, we're gonna have to hustle to get to that because we gotta do a little bit of extra stuff like this. Also the fitment around the outlet box and stuff, you know, it's gonna be kind of fiddly. If I can get that stuff done today, I'll be in good shape. So in fairness, I've also realized that not only have I got to do that bit, I've also got to get this conduit elbow in here. Well, I was about to say back to the plane of this piece of wood, although I think actually, yeah, that was my plan. And then I was going to dog leg up and into the box because the center line of this is actually off the back of that, right? It needs to be out here, not back there. However, this needs to really be tight to there so that we're close to, if this is 2 inches, we're close to a center line of the bottom surface of that beam, which that's the thing. The fixture box, wherever it goes, will need to be on the center line of the width of the wood that we decide to put on this. And then it'll need to get from that center line to the plane that's on the center line of this orifice in the box. So long story short, I could probably do a slop honest job of basically what I was about to do here was, you know, look at that, make sure I'm aligned at the top, make sure that the top of this conduit run is tangent to the beam, and just sort of plot out a diagonal hole. Looks like it goes like this here. And do that with a 1-inch drill bit. And I think that there would be enough room in that opening for me to weasel this through there. Maybe I'll go 1.25 inches just to be safe. But I'll get that I'll get that opening through here, and then I needed to get this portion constructed. This portion down there can wait, and I can do a slight bend left or right to get onto the center line that I need to be in. But right now I need to get through here and out to there and connect up into this box at least with the conduit so that later I can send the wiring through there and keep going. But I can't build this after the drywall is up, so I got to get this done as well. Then I can go back to putting up drywall. Well, I didn't want to mess around trying to, you know, make one offset to elbow and bend up to the EMT with a tube bender and then try to weasel it through. It would have been a fun exercise to see if it could be done. I don't have a tube bender with me today, so I just got a cast offset, which doesn't quite set us all the way back there, but not a big deal. And so then we do get back there with a hold down so that this is nice and well controlled. Everything's been, all the set screws are threaded down tightly, and that'll keep us sitting, you know, almost with one of these types of connectors. You're really, I don't know, where's my tape? 5/8 of an inch or something from the surface of the beam with the highest point of, do we get in underneath that? No, 3/4, I guess. All right. So a true 1 inch. Well, we got a 1/2 inch of drywall, I'm sorry. So it's only 1/4 inch above there. And so, yeah, easily add 3/4 inch with 1/4 or even 3/8 inch milled trench in it to just cover the last little bit of the conduit that's sticking out. We haven't been able to decide where exactly the island's going to be in terms of this dimension yet. So when we do, we'll throw the rest of the conduit that I bought in there, cut it to the right length, throw the fixture box on and rock and roll. But for now, I can cover this area with drywall. So let's get that much. And we're back. So I was able to do the same sort of thing in these areas here, backfilled with hot mud or pre-filled, and then taped with multi-purpose. A couple days ago now, since I took yesterday and did some work from home and tried to cover my son for my wife, and I am dealing with a cold, as you might be able to hear. Since baby Hank went to daycare, that was practically an immediate situation, was a cold came home with us. So I've identified what needs to be finished areas of drywall here in pencil, some, obviously screws that should be at least filled. This area is not identified as needing to be finished because we've got the hood and then we've got a tile backsplash. We've got tile backsplash throughout this whole area here. All these holes do need to be finished. This is sort of one of the more intense areas of finish that needs to happen. It's relatively large for this project, and it's a focal point. Those couple of verticals, I ended up circling those, but as discussed a moment ago, there is tile backsplash. So, I don't know, I'm just a little bit torn on, the thing is, I've got whatever I've got left for all-purpose. I'm going to get the areas that need to be finished because they truly need at least a first coat. And then I'm going to see what I've got left for mud. And if I'm trying to use up the end of it, I'll throw it on some of these secondary areas that are in wet areas, maybe even this horizontal seam that's right at the counter level at the sink, just because we are going to paint. I mean, all of this, despite having just been taped, everything's going to get sprayed with primer to seal it. But I may as well use up the mud that I've got. If I come to the end of it sooner than I need, and I need to get a whole new pail, which actually, to be honest with you, there will be another pail in the finishing process here, especially with this across the ceiling. So I may or may not put one coat on literally everything so you don't even see the tape, but we'll just have to see. Some of the things I'm up against are getting everything on here today and getting out of here to take my wife out to dinner for our anniversary. And it's Friday, and it's going to be, the weekend everything will be dried. And I don't want to come back and start catching up areas to the same point that I'm currently dried at with everything else. I'd like to get to some point today so that we dry over the weekend where the next step is ready for everything. And we aren't starting to split up steps, because that gets really, really annoying really quickly. Because you're sanding and then you've got dust. I mean, I don't do much sanding in between coats. I will fly all around here and just catch highs and, try not to lift edges of tape and stuff. But I will be using a knife to sort of scrape off any kind of curds. And then, the sanding I'll do in the second coat and the third coat. But the taping and first coat, I'm very likely just going to scrape with a knife. So anyway, if you start mixing things up, then you got dust and sanding debris, and you've got wet mud going up, and you've got dusty surfaces where the dust that you've got coming off of a sanding operation is literally statically clinging to everything. And then you're trying to put mud onto a dusty surface, and it's just not good for business. So I try to avoid that. So we're going to scrape everything quick, and try to make a work area here to be able to get to everything, and then whip up that mud again, use it up, starting with the places that definitely need it. Probably go right across this ceiling on this long seam, right, to start with, get that out of my way, and give it the longest kind of time to dry, basically. And then we'll do the, that's a flat joint. No, I'm sorry, these are all butt joints because I cut that back, and then I put the cut edge of the sheet up. So there are no flat joints where the factory edge that's tapered is coming through. These are all butts. So these will all get a first coat up and around there. And then I'll work my way from there after I've warmed up into this area that's kind of a focal point. And then, like I say, we'll see where the mud is and how I'm feeling about where this phase is going to be called, finished for all of this. I've also got this pre-fill happening. This isn't too bad over here. We could look at a straight edge and just start trying to see, where's my big knife here? Although it's not really that enough. Let's use the square. Try to look at what I'm trying to remedy over here. Trying to get from the jam, which is just under that little bit of tape. See, over here on the surface, on the left-hand side, we're still sitting a little over 1/8 of an inch there. Same, a little over 1/8 of an inch there. Feels about the same. No, actually, we're out of that right here. We're good enough right there. So, like from here down and around the corner, this certainly needs to fill. And that's where we've got these adjustable boxes. I'm going to cut that plastic back so it stops interfering with my mud at the edges, because I want to be sure that if I'm building this up, it's building up that plane right up to kind of the edge of the hole at least, right? So that the faceplate will cover it. There's no use in doing this all really nicely and then pulling this mask away and having it take more than I've got and can cover with the faceplate to the outlet, because then we're back there really close to the outlet playing games with mud again. So in this case, I got to be more specific and careful about the way in which this is masked. I got some other instances around here where there's like a hole right next to the box where I'd be better off tucking that mask in there and, thereby less of a hassle with the mudding of that. So let's get this place whipped into shape. Ooh, boy. I ain't never done a worse. I ain't never done. Well, the quality isn't all that bad. It's just taken me a lot of messing around to put this stuff up. It's really thick. Here are my excuses. I feel like crap. And I didn't sleep, and I haven't slept for like 8 months. But I'm better than this as far as it taking me an hour to get this far. I would have been done by now. There's that little more to do. I've obviously run out of mud, but I've only just stopped. Ooh, that skip I need to get. That's not good. So, what are the problems? The mud is awfully stiff, and it's cold in here because I like to not sweat to death while I'm working. And here's a 6. So it's chilly, which is stiffening it up. I've had a bad experience, and you could definitely add water, but if you add a little, it's very touchy, and if you add a little bit too much, you're done. You're not going to dry your mud out, and it would set me, I'd have to run and get some, I guess, and try again, but I really was loath to add any water to that. I was just thinking I would brute force it, which I have been. Maybe I'll add a little that might make a good test. I'm going to go get some. Maybe I can add a little water to it carefully. Or to start with, I'll whip it up, and then I'll try it as is, because that's been open for a couple of weeks now, and sometimes that is enough to tighten things. There's a little sheen still, so generally speaking, we're looking good. I was pulling my knife across this rather than lengthways, which is typical, just because I can't get it to sit down flat. It's so stiff. And then I've got a bad tape spot right here. This is a short piece. I came from that way, and I came from that way, and then we need a little piece here that Tim put up, but it stands alone from all the other tape, and I think it might have been because I didn't really babysit this area. Anyway, we're gonna have to wait for those high spots to actually dry, cut them out, and then put some more mud through there, and hopefully they'll continue to stay down at that point. So we've got, some do as I say, not as I do situations going on here. This area is working out okay, though, around the window. We're in good shape there. And I don't mind, I'm trying to mitigate these ridges. I don't know if there's a few here or there, little ridge there, I try to mitigate that, but don't chase them forever because you can't get all of them. And that's the type of thing that just, as soon as it's dry, you can take that off with the blade, doing this operation here, right? And then the rest of it has been floated as a plane. So more important than that, you want to, this area is a bit light. This area is light. I'm just not at my best today. I'm happier with that over there, this and around the window. As soon as you're on the wall, it's a lot easier. Working upside down, I'll say that is also a component to it being a pain in the butt here. So I finish this all up, and then right before I go, try to carefully add. That can also get you into trouble if it's not quite to a dry point far enough. You can lift everything, so you got to be careful there. My tape for the dust wall is kind of in my way. You really want to see a nice, smooth, straight line if you're a pro. But let's go get some mud and play around with that, see if we can tweak it, see if we can make it work the way that it's supposed to. Maybe we'll do this horizontal seam. I don't know. Whew. I'm glad I'm getting this done today, but I did not feel like coming out. I do not feel good.
What you doing? Are you on the floor? I'm on the floor too. You like to be on the floor with me? Yeah, that's fun. What? What? How are you? Yeah. Yeah, there's a floor.
Well, we've had the weekend to dry, and I don't know, there's a subtle difference here somewhere between the USG all-purpose like 4-gallon pail and 5-gallon pail. This one's black from Home Depot, that one's white from Lowe's, but you can see the two different colors here. The, let's see, I want to say the whiter stuff, yeah, because I came back and put all that up. The whiter stuff is from the darker pail. The black pail. Anyway, not quite sure what the deal is with that. I have got this big old honking light out because my headlamp's dead, thankfully. I did just scrape everything for high points, but you can see how it changes, you know, what you can see to send light down the side, or from a shallow angle you can start to see, you know, the actual finish, as opposed to just looking at this, you know, otherwise you can't quite see, you know, what you're looking at. So it's important here that not only do I showcase, now I'm not a professional drywaller, but both the level that I work to with that first coat and the problem that you're going to have there with that area right over top of the tape that's built up with shallow light. So we've got to make a big buildup that's wide and smooth and gradual to get us up and over that high point and back down again, so that we don't end up seeing this in the final finish. So I'm not going to sand, because I'm going to bury most of all of that in a layer, you know, in the second coat. The rest of these areas, these are all done from, you know, this horizontal line at the counter level below, completely finished. Both areas behind the upper cabinets on either side of this big window are finished. Over here behind the refrigerator is all finished. That's, you know, where that stuff's going to stay. It's embedded in mud. It's taped, you know, professionally, and it'll get primed in and sealed in that way from humidity. And that'll be, like I say, how we leave things. So at this point, we're going to focus on areas that are going to need to be well finished. So one of the biggest looming ones is going to be all the way overhead here, as well as these areas on the face of this wall that have got, you know, some degree of, you know, lumpage happening there, right? So we got to get to that type of a thing. And we're not going to sand at this point, because all you're going to do is, no matter how careful you are going to find the tape, and then you're back to kind of reapplying the first coat, which is what I'm going to avoid. So we're going to go up from here, we're going to put the second coat on, we're going to be as careful as possible about that coat, more careful in terms of its final finish, meaning I'm going to be more consistent, or careful of its consistency out of the pail. We did leave this smoothed over, you know, when we left, and I pulled down the sides with the bucket-shaped scraping tool that fits the radius. And so we do what we can to keep crumbs and stuff from forming, dry pieces from getting into that. I scraped everything down, and that normally falls away from gravity. So there shouldn't be any crumbage coming at us. Now, the other thing that I needed to do that I neglected to get done, unfortunately, is I broke my own rule. We need some tape on that inside corner there. We need to tape the inside corner above the window, because that piece below is new. So I pulled the upper half of the tape that used to be from that ceiling to the old wall board. That upper half that's exposed to those screw holes was peeled out of there. So now we've got nothing, and we've got a tape over there, but that's someday. And so that's where I left off on the other end, but I will get that done down there. This is existing to like there. So it's just 6, 8 inches of tape. It hasn't happened there. So I think since this is an unhung piece and we're not going to get over into there, this is, you know, not going to get taped right now. But we're going to try and get this finished all in this region of the project So I will tape that, and I will tape that at the end of the day today, probably. Let's get the, our sea legs, or vice versa. Maybe the thing to do would be to tape it first. Anyway, we're going to get both these things done today in a couple of hours. We got, 4:35, 36. We got 2.5 hours to get this done. Let's rock and roll. Well, this has had almost 24 hours. It's had 18 or 20 hours. But as you can hopefully see, these dark, splotchy areas are not dry enough. And over the window here, same situation. Again, we've got two different colors of mud, annoyingly, that gray and this white. Which the stuff I put up yesterday is on its way to being the white. It's that area there left over and this area here, which I guess was the first pail, the first all-purpose green lid pail that was a white pail. And that is weird. Yeah, because it's up. Yeah, that was the color of the first pail. So the black pail of all-purpose has been drying white. And I got a second pail of it, which was in the middle of yesterday, and it's drying white. And so I found a Reddit thread because I was curious. The Northeast US has recently gotten, or is making the transition to these black pails, and I haven't found anything else at this time with regard to that. They both seem to be drying and are just two different colors. I have yet to sand, although I will say that that is a lot rougher than that is extremely, well, at least right there, a lot texturally totally different, and essentially the same tools and technique putting it up. Weird. Not sure which is harder. You may have noticed I have finally opted to get a actual drywall sander. Normally I use a 9-inch pole sander with the Gator circle pad. It's about like that. It's just on a hand-powered pole, like a broom handle. And I've also got a DA, like a Milwaukee battery dual action sander, palm sander, that I would use in certain areas, which I'll probably get into a little bit here because it's just the same thing but smaller. However, this year I got into the Milwaukee dust collection finally, or dust extractor, which is really how you need to, or what you need to utilize for this type of dust. Specifically, drywall dust is going to destroy a regular shop vac. And they've got those knockouts that you can put water in, stuff. I've had those. But all they are is another thing to trip through on the site, another thing to tip over because of the tension from the cord or the hose, which is my nemesis, cords and hoses, which are my nemesis for all of the Mystery Men fans. How many flips in total? Anyway, I was excited to use this. Not going to get into these areas. They're not dry. So today is going to be the other side of that tape, the other side of this tape, and that's kind of it because I don't feel safe enough. These areas appear to be dry, but frankly, if I can see visually that some of that stuff that went up at the same time isn't dry yet, I do not want to tear into something and find out it wasn't dry enough. Not only will it ruin the paper that I'm using, which isn't a huge deal, but I just bought that thing and I don't want to have to go out and get more discs for sandpaper if I can help it. It would ruin the area that I'm working in and I have to come back and touch it up. So I guess we'll just put a little bit of the +3. We're going to go to that. Some of you may have wondered why, I even went beyond taping with the multi-purpose because it's harder to sand and you really just need the glues in it to do the taping with. It's excellent for taping. However, I wanted to be certain that I had buried the tape well, and so the finish on this above us is kind of rough, and it was because I knew I was going to get into the power sander. And the thing about, you want to do what you can with your liquids and your soft putties, just as a big think, before they harden. It's a best practice. But I was less interested in doing my best work overhead here because it's the least handy place to do a really good job applying. And there's a long stretch to do here with the time that I have to do it in. And I knew I'd be power sanding it. And so my point is, I really wanted that tape in there well, and now after a quick sand, when it is dry, I will put the +3 on it, which is the easier to sand, easier to put up, and you know, create a smooth troweled finish that needs a lot less sanding. And then when you come to sand it, it sands far easier. And so altogether, that's more of a finishing material after taping. I use the taping mud just to be sure that my tape stays inside of it and I don't quickly and easily by accident sand into it, because then you're back to dealing with a tape and you just don't want to go backwards in a situation like this relatively large area for me. So all of that being said, I'm going to switch over from the taping mud from the multi-purpose green lid now that I'm fairly certain of the geometry, that I've got enough thickness over all the taped areas, not too much, but certainly enough to power sand and be careful of, and you know, avoid getting into the tape. And then we'll do a very careful +3 lighter weight application for our second top coating, and hope to not really need very much sanding after that, and you know, be down to a point where the third pass won't do everything that we're trying to finish, but we will use that again to just touch up essentially, because with the final coat and the touching up, you want to be all using the same mud again. You want to be careful about densities, and you want to go back and forth, or in sanding you can find that you've got a harder material and a softer material and you're never going to make them blend. So now that we're done with the hard multi-purpose, we'll go to the relatively soft +3 and we'll stay there, you know, for the duration. And it's just, you know, what you want to use. Too bad, it looks like Tim had the breeze coming through here most of today already, trying to get this to dry. He probably could see it wasn't dry, but no harm done. We can walk right in and get to work when it is dry later. We'll get the other side of this taping done, which is what was necessary here. And there's probably a couple loose ends that we could tie in another way, shape, or form. We'll come up with something. And we're back. It's already kind of warm in here, so we're going to crack a window. But one of the nice things about this project is that we have done everything up until this point to mitigate the task of landing this plane now. And, you know, the finishing that's going to happen, it's always more involved, takes longer. There are more details than anticipated. And, you know, it's just an interesting dynamic with every given project, where early on you can get rid of all the old structural components, put the new windows in, close the house back up on the outside, you know, get this beam and stuff moved around. We did some big things very quickly, relatively speaking, and now things slow down again, relatively speaking, because we've got to be careful about what the final look's going to be, and we don't want to create a situation where we've buttoned things up but unfortunately have to unbutton them to address an issue that we hadn't seen coming. So we've laid the groundwork at this point. This is where the project kind of turns from foundational things, not in the literal sense but in a figurative sense, that we've done for ourselves to make life easy from this point to the end of the project. And we're going to start leveraging that stuff. So first and foremost, this horizontal elevation is, you know, just below where the low voltage wire comes out. And that's because that's essentially, now it's not completely and utterly perfect. I didn't throw it up with the laser, so it's one homogeneous elevation. I've been measuring from the subfloor, which is has whoops in it and stuff. So, and throwing a 6 foot level on, which is good enough. So you end up with discrepancy like that. But essentially, that elevation is such that everything below there requires no more work from us. We've got tile backsplash from, that's the bottom edge of the cabinet, basically, of the upper cabinet. So we've got tile backsplash from here to the counter. We've got the counter, and we've got lower cabinets. And so, especially in this area here beyond, now you can see what I've got up here with an X in it is one upper cabinet and the other one's over there. We've also got immediately adjacent the over refrigerator cabinets and the fridge itself. And so none of this blend to the old drywall will need anything. Obviously nothing necessary behind the cabinet, nothing from that elevation down. So we've got a very little bit of work to do here, which feels really good. Oh, and I'm sorry, we've got the trim. So if we wanted, we could scribe 2 inches to be safe because it'll be greater than that. Well, from this face, maybe 2 would be not quite right. But we could scribe, but we will do what we can to finish over onto there without disrupting the edge of the jamb. And obviously that's going to be covered with trim. So we have a real small amount here that's going to need to be, addressed in terms of final finish. What does it look like now? There are, some build-up marks and stuff in it. I don't know if you can see that on camera. So it shouldn't need more mud, really. Maybe a tiny bit of touch-up. But it's got what it needs for build-up in these areas, and we'll be able to address those and take them down by sanding to a finish that's quite nice here. And again, we've got trim in the corner and the backsplash here. So, really none of that's even involved. And even here, none of this is even involved because the backsplash to there. So delightful. Now, again, upper cabinet, and over here, backsplash in and around this corner. However, open shelving. So this is our biggest sort of complicated area here. We've got the existing inside corner finishes to the ceiling. We've got an inside corner wall to wall that we've done. Again, we've done what we can do here as a cursory kind of thing. So you can see that, my last pass was on the left-hand side. We've got some stuff that'll come right down with a quick scrape. And then as far as straightness in that corner, there's some whoops, a little bit of some whoops there, and obviously some pock marks and stuff. So we're going to get this sanded real nicely, as well as this area here, again, behind the shelving, and a blend that we had in there and some taping that we had to do. And we got some big bumps up there from pock marks and stuff there. And over to here and down this other side, we had to build this all up, which we've got this into a pretty good plane now with the edge of the window, which has been taped to protect it. So, there's that to there, and then once again, this is all backsplash, so not a problem there, not a problem at all. So really, we did all of this build up here, but basically, we'll be looking to make up the rest of this for the most part with the thin set and get the tile in there at a decently smooth plane. We don't want to see a whoop in the tile, so I will look at this for flatness, maybe add a little bit more mud and stuff here. But again, this is all going to be tile. So our focus is going to be here where we've got some troweling. That's a bit of a low, right past that ridge. It's difficult to say because the ridge is going to knock things down. Like I'm saying, this ridge here, that leading edge is going to push things behind it into shadow, although that's probably a little bit low right there. And up above, we've got a bit of a whoop from the taping that's happened. So that essentially, that's the thing here. You need to understand that we're not going to take that ridge down by sanding right now. That would be wrong. You're going to have this happen. You're going to pull that tape right up to the top again, or you're going to get there quickly. So what you do is you build from that high point way far down here. You take that high point and you fill from him all the way down here with a plane of a wide trowel or knife, so that it does a really gradual up and over and back down again, and you never see that high point. You can't be trying to take that high point down right now, or you have the tape exposed again. So you're going to see me adding mud. So I'm going to do some scraping here. I'm going to do what I can with the light to understand the surfaces that I'm dealing with. I'm going to take ridges and stuff off that are going to trip the knife up, and that's how you get some of these, what are they called? These lines in here that I'm calling whoops. That's because my trowel is moving and I can't control that. It's moving because it's bumping into stuff. So we're going to take features off that are going to disturb the trowel's ability to lay things down in a smooth fashion. That's where the sanding and the scraping is coming from. Not really working on the forms here, if you can follow what I'm saying. We're really not trying to attack these forms in the sense that we're not trying to make things the final shape of smoothness. We're trying to take away things that are going to disturb the application of more finishing compound so that we can get things to be very nice and smooth looking. So again, a focus here. Now I took the sides, I put the framework for the hood up at its elevation. It's pretty level. Now I intend to tip the sides of it in, but for now I plotted them up with the plumb so that we know that so long as we're finished to this point, or beyond that point, we're going to be okay. So I may even put the angle up on there. Obviously I'm going to work over these lines. I'm not going to be excruciating and just finish through to here, but not beyond, or, vice versa. You're going to have to be going beyond where it won't be necessary so that we can come back and cover it up, and everything right up to the bitter end is looking good. Same case here, right over here to the hood and down to that elevation. And then at the end here, I've got the last cupboard base on the floor is a 2-foot, 24-inch after the stove. However, the exposed shelves are only going to be, I don't even know if they're going to touch the window trim. It might be a faux pas. So we have like a 12-inch or even a 10-inch wide, 1, 2, 3 open shelves at the same elevation as those in the corner to kind of echo those. And they'll have a little underlighting in the lowest one here, the way that the lowest shelf over there has underlighting. So, the wall behind those and up into the ceiling area needs to be looking its best there. Behind the stove up in here doesn't need to be any better than this, because again, the tile that's coming through as a backsplash is going to come all the way up into this area, drop and keep going there, and that's going to be kind of a cool look. And there's some things that you can do where if we use some long thin tiles, maybe they're in here horizontally for the backsplash, but then they're in here vertically in this area, and then they start back to horizontal, or vice versa, verticals, and then we could do horizontals and then verticals again. Or you can carry the whole thing through and have the whole thing as though it's a piece of fabric with a certain pattern on it, which is to say the tile pattern that you choose, and it goes right along, and then it just gets bigger, so there's more tile pattern of the same type into there, and then it shrinks back and goes over here. Different looks. We will do that type of decision making when we're looking at things with the final lighting on it, with the countertops and stuff like that, at least, and some other factors to help us make those decisions. It could be modeled in the computer. However, since we're so close at the point of having cupboards and counter and lighting and the walls painted and stuff like that, you may as well bring in the tiles themselves that you're thinking about using and look at them in real life and make those decisions in the real circumstance. So we'll probably go about it that way. However, the point of this little spiel is that you can see that we have a very small amount of finishing work to do in these areas, the largest of which is here. And I'm actually going to put off this ceiling work because we need to do demo of that corner closet. We need to do demo of this whole old kitchen. We need to get this flooring all out of here. We're going to end up with plastic over this and over there. And this is going to be a dusty work area. And that kitchen's going to be gone, so they're going to need to be using this kitchen. Therefore, I'm going to move this plastic, either this exact plastic or some new stuff. We're going to put it right down the plane of this upper wall, right down the plane of this post, and bring it right through here so that we've got the door into here. This is, at that point, painted, lower cabinets, countertop, the running water, the stove and the refrigerator, and, looking at what to do about tile, etc. But for the most part, far easier to keep clean and to start using in here. The power's on, yada, yada. And then to the right of this plane where the plastic is protecting us, then we've got a more active dust making job site in this region. And when we get down to making the drywall repairs that are necessary, because this is going to be a living room here, and bringing that, getting that closet out of there and going around that outer corner over there, it may mean that we, depart the plastic here and take it to the corner, or even turn and go right over here so that the doorway in this whole area is in this kind of job site. But we're going to have board to put up over here, taping to do over here, and then we can do all of that drywall finishing as well as this drywall finishing when we can see the light coming all the way across the ceiling, when the plastic isn't on our way, because we're kind of at the plastic now with this most recent coat. And you're going to want to go a bit wider to get that to, as we were talking over there, to get that hump to blend into the old, up and over the new, and back into the new board. You're going to be able to, or going to want to see that light. So this plastic is altogether in our way, and there's a lot of work here and a lot of dust, and I just as soon get these cabinets in here by the end of this week. We're at Wednesday today at, a little after 1, and so I would like to be at a point today where I've gotten these areas that needed on the south side wall sanded. I will say that we're going to do some work on this stuff also, because that's going to be part of, being able to prime. That's bare drywall, and then they can paint it. And the thing is, all these areas against this existing ceiling, now this stuff here is going to be within the hood. Down there, that inside corner is kind of a different story. It'll be a part of finishing that all in down there, so we may peter out with what we've finished for up here. But if I could get that finished, primed, and they could paint it along with, this outside wall, then what we choose to put up on this ceiling, I think we're going to go with shiplap boards. That's going to be how we finish these corners. They're going to add a thickness that brings the surface down and away from the unfinished areas, like above the sink there, most notably up here, as well as when we're all done with those boards, there'll be some kind of small cove or crown in the technical sense that will be used to finish the edges of that, thereby making any finishing of those edges a non sequitur. And it's going to be a big savings, because acute angles like that are really kind of a pain in the butt to finish, because if I'm on the ceiling plane, the handle of the trowel is trying to hit the wall, and if I'm up into the ceiling on the wall, the handle is hitting the ceiling. And this is an easier version, but as the angle becomes more acute, real problem area finishing drywall there. Plus, we want to make some changes to the lighting, and we'll be able to open up in logical panels and tip the drywall down, daisy chain some more lights, move some locations, whatever we're going to do here. Put the piece that came down right back up again with a few screws, a quick taping pass, nothing that can't happen over top of them using this kitchen because we're not going to have to sand it. And then all of that can go right in under those boards, and we'll never miss it, and we won't have to finish it. So we're trying to be smart here in terms of timeline. I'm trying to get not only logistically be able to see where I don't need to worry, but also help me with, the amount of work that's before me here. It really takes the edge off and being able to see just exactly where I do and don't need to focus my efforts. Not to mention it'll make up, a big savings on not wasting any time. We'll put the ceiling finishing in with the rest of this project down the road a little bit with this, because as for right now, we're in a race to get this ready to prime and then let them put some color on it and park our toe kick back in here, our lower cabinets back in here, get our sink and plumbing running again, roll this refrigerator in, roll the stove and cooktop in, get that working, put the, guts of the hood up in here, come cutting through from outside through that existing center hole that we put in, which will keep us concentric to the other openings that are in that, finishing component on the outside in the siding. It'll carry that center and cut that hole right on through our insulation. Our drywall. I did hold off of insulating that high, so once I've got that nice big hole in there, I can go and touch up the insulation all around through the hole in the drywall. Then we can put our plumbing right outside and just plug in that hood, and then you can go right into using the hood over the stove, and they can get in here in a week or two and make their dish to pass for Thanksgiving, and we can get the countertop placed in here to measure and do their thing with the cabinets that are locked into position at that time. One caveat will be that if we're doing plastic right here, the island's going to be, we're going to have to do something with the fact that the island is like right in the way of that. So maybe the island won't come into play just yet. Maybe we'll have to hold off on placing that. We will have to see, because it really isn't worth changing my sort of tack now with everything else. So I guess that's enough talking. We're going to get into knocking down the ridges, a light sand. We'll whip up the +3 again and do a very careful, we may even water it down, a very careful application, skim coating this area, pick a side or one or the other sides of this corner to come back and do, one operation on. You can't do both sides of it, but then we'll leave it as it lies. So, in fact, I'll likely try to get the lion's share today and do the left-hand side of the corner and not do any work here other than sand, because then tomorrow I'll do all the sanding today and all of what I can put up for mud. So tomorrow all that will be left is putting up some mud on this other side of this corner in this region here, and that'll be the only thing that's necessary there, which is a Thursday, meaning that Friday, if I'm satisfied with what I was able to do in that small area, which seems more likely than leaving the bigger area for second, if I can address this, sand it a little bit and be happy with it, then Friday I can throw a square of plastic over this window and that window and throw a drop cloth on the hardwood over there, and I'll do what I can to avoid, I'll probably have to put some plastic on that, but I'll be spraying from this way and just get this primed, get all of this exterior wall area primed, get above over here all primed. I'm going to need to stick some plastic over those outlets so I don't spray them, but that's another thing that you can do now that the outlets have all been covered with this plastic. We can just, spray primer and paints and stuff with reckless abandon And then this weekend, they can kind of go gung-ho. Tim can get his cabinet set in here, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm not sure we're going to make it. We're, feeling this election unfortunately didn't go the way that we had hoped, and it's bringing us down. It's bringing my wife down. It's bringing my customers down, and it's kind of sucking the focus out of things. But I'm here today, and we're going to get something done. So let's get cracking. Well, forgive me. It's a lot to remember here. I know I haven't had to say this a lot, but I missed, getting a little coverage basically of this process over here. But I'm sanding with the pole sander, and I'm looking for my tape because, I physically followed that with my knife here to fill this area. And now I want to get back to, with that ostensibly flat surface with the sander, I want to get back to that kind of precisely. And I've also got this light at a very shallow angle here. Now I'm looking for physical things to help me, decide when I've given this enough attention and if I've given it too much or whatever, what have you. Now we've got some pock marks here, and we've got some scratching that is lower than the plane that I want. They're lower than the plane that I want. So when we come back with very thin +3, we're gonna very carefully skim coat this and look to, get rid of the texture that's basically in here. Now above, I'm being more critical because I know once again that is in a low spot up here. And so trying to sand, this is where you want to pay attention with light and have an understanding of, the theory that we're working with here. If I get a straight flat edge, you'll be able to see here that, it's hard to see it, I guess. Maybe from the other side if I was on a ladder. That's the thing to do, is to see where the light's coming underneath the straight edge. Now, I don't want to belabor this point if you get it, but, I love Vancouver Carpenter. I like Ben's content, but sometimes he hasn't got some of these things that I see the potential to be able to showcase. So while I'm touching on the edges, we've got a low-lying area here. So to take that texture out isn't going to do anything but essentially push this whole thing down into a smooth divot. And sometimes you can get away with that if it's large enough in the right circumstance, but I can tell that over here, we're getting more like an acceptable surface. And as we come over here, we're low in the middle. And as we get back over here, we're flat again. So, I can say with some confidence that this is kind of low. Boy, this really needed to be thinned. This cottage cheesy kind of like, what's the word? Anyway, there's a word for this texture, but it's really lumpy like cottage cheese. And that's just going to be from different densities or different drynesses of material. That is very likely some mud that had been out for a while, applied, or had otherwise kicked around here. And then later on that same day, it's in what I'm taking out of the bucket in some of the best areas of the bucket. And so it's not hard crumb, but it is of a completely different dryness. And so the smooth, soft stuff goes down entirely differently than that stuff. And it's kind of like curds. So we got to get those opened up as I did there and sand it out and yada, yada. So we're going to keep working now that I've addressed the area around the window for the most part. And we're down to just what's left for low-lying areas. I want to get to this point everywhere, come back and very carefully apply some very soft and smooth +3, and be super careful about my trowel marks and leave it there to dry for us. And then tomorrow I'll get like I was saying, the smaller area here of this sort of focal point and do the same thing. Meanwhile, if there's some trowel marks over here, I haven't got to do, they're high, so I can just kind of skate and take them off. A little bit of sanding, no problem, but no more wet application. And so the only wet application is in place, should be in theory in places that I hadn't been. And then the following day, Friday, again, taking the high points, troweling marks and stuff down, a little bit of a light sand, and then being comfortable enough with that level of finish, which I'm sure there are a few things that I won't love, but I can at least prime everything and they can paint. And quite frankly, if there's stuff that we didn't like that makes it through priming and painting and is being seen and is driving us crazy, at that point, you can use spackle, and we can use spackle, and a quick, roll with the same color, and it'll be a completely handled situation. That's, a best case scenario. So I will run some coverage on the rest of this work now, doing the same thing, sharp angle with the light so I can see what I'm doing, not going overboard with taking out every single mark. If I'm careful to keep the low-lying stuff there because it's low-lying, then I'll add, and then we'll get out of here. There you go. We've been over using that pole light since I haven't got to hold it. These areas here, it's a little high, if anything, there's ridges, and we've got the pock marks. Those aren't, it's not important that we get those covered. We've feathered and otherwise scraped down by pressing on one side of the blade and leaving the other to float, so we're able to feather edges. And again, any of the positive geometry that you're seeing there, very slight, will be coming out. And as you can see, that slight highlight, that'll be where it's thinnest and it's darker above and below because it's a bit thicker, and that's sucking the moisture out faster. And overall, that's what we wanted to see, right? We had a high point here, and we wanted to kind of blend it low and blend it high so that it becomes a very gradual bump instead of just a ridge there, which hopefully we've achieved, to some degree here. Now that's misleading because of the color, so we'll continue to get that dialed. But over here, same kind of story, a few high little flecks. We've been down the left-hand side of the corner, and other little kind of questionable areas. A little bit of work here. The paper, I got into the paper by accident there next to that outlet, so we cleaned that up. These areas here, behind the trim, behind the cupboard, and otherwise where it's being seen. The blend from the corner down onto the paper. Actually, you know what? It makes a good... I should go right up and onto that upper part. That was just tape. A tape pass. That really isn't coated well enough. So I'm going to fill that little area in up there. But over here in this corner, looking good. And just a little bit of work there at the top edge, just in case you could see something from that angle. So, and above here, for the most part, just whatever pock marks were in the coat and the very feather edges on either side to bring that in a little bit wider. I didn't feel it was necessary to coat the whole thing because really the pock marks, they will fight you, especially when there's some dust in here. So I blew them out really good, and I drove and dragged really tight and hard onto them to get them filled and smooth, and I got the edges. Otherwise, if I hadn't had pock marks, I would have built up over everything and just gone wider to either side. But in trying to do that, the pock marks will translate through those passes or that coating because you can't push it as hard if you're trying to do that operation. So first I'll get that covered and I'll pull the edges out. If I'm not satisfied with that, it might need tomorrow, as I'm doing this right hand side, a little bit of a full coat then after a light sand there over everything. And anything that needs a little bit more applied to it here can happen tomorrow along with this here. And again, being smaller, hopefully Friday this won't need anything but some sanding. And so again, thinking ahead, managing the size and scope of things, being realistic, and in general, I think we're going to end up with what we want here. If anything, that's all about as full as I could have made that. And if I need to put a little more on just to fill and get that to really, for us to really lose that bumpage, we can do that tomorrow and leave that to dry to Friday. So all in all, fairly productive. I'm going to put a little over there and then I'm going to get out of here. Okay, that got dried over last night and I came back today and this all this type of thing here would be a concern if it were an area that needed to be finished. And so laying out what we need and don't need to do here has been a huge help. We only need to start here and below this area here where the trim is. It's all quite, the first shelf is going to be right here. Trim's going to be there. So we're really starting here to kind of look and see that we have what we need. So all this newer, the +3 is like a darker gray. And again, starting here, the hood's in the way. So we're just looking in this area here. We've got a little bit of pock marks, a little bit of pocking in the initial skim coat that I haven't gone back over. That's a lighter color white. And we got into the tape here by accident a little bit just above where the trim is going to cover. Over here next to the window, there's a scuff right there. Some pock marks. But again, that's in that white area. If you back off, you can see it's between what I addressed yesterday with the +3. The +3 is able to do a much nicer job. In fact, that's a pocket that's filled. So anywhere that's missing the +3, and this is again, backsplash area, not a problem. Over here, some pock marks there. But in the area that's a +3 coat on top of that, looking real good. And I'm fairly content with that tape and the way in which the light will be applied here. It's never gonna get like a raking sharp angle. So it could use a little extra work. And the thing is, at the end of my work here, if I have a little +3 left over on the hawk, I'll apply a little bit there because it won't hurt anything. To the left-hand side of the light, I've got a little pocking. I scraped today and I dragged something annoyingly, so I've got a little bit of pressure filling to do on the left. It's the right-hand side that needs, the proper coat in this whole area here that's gonna get it. And up through here is looking really good. That's a scratch. It'll be under the cabinets, and that little nook will be under the trim. So it's just this area here and over above the kitchen window. There are a couple low areas, so I'll reapply there, but that corner's looking good. And so I'm able to check this stuff quick. And again, I'm gonna break out a little +3. I'll get a little touch-up done in the areas that I largely did yesterday, and I'll put the lion's share down in this sort of region here today on the right-hand side of the corner, work up to my work yesterday. Today's a Thursday, so tomorrow, then I can come in, sand everything, do a little bit of touch-up with +3, and I'm gonna leave them then to, I'll move my tools and stuff out, pack up the knives and everything like that for right now, but I'll leave them to move the cabinets out and sort of clean and vacuum things in here, put some plastic over these windows and the door and maybe that window there, pull a drop cloth over this hardwood floor, and generally get me a cleanup this weekend. Then Monday I can just walk in here, get set up and spray the primer. And if I give it an hour or two, I can put their color on top of it as well without worries about getting overspray on the ceiling or anything else like that. It can just kind of blend out this way. And so really quickly and easily we can do all of that with spraying and be done with it. And that's a better value to Tim and his wife, because they can do the kind of cleaning and prepping for spraying work themselves, and I can address drywall finish quality all the way down to the end of the week this week, rather than trying to find time to do the clean and prep either Friday or Monday, and thereby not getting to the painting, the priming and the painting until Tuesday, and whatever else that may bring. So we're going to continue to try to be smart here, but for now let's put a little more material on the wall. Well, that is taping and a first coat to everything. A second coat done in +3, so tape and first coat in all-purpose. A second coat in +3 yesterday to all of the areas mentioned here and the left side of this corner. So then a third coat in +3 to touch a few of those areas up, and a second coat applied to the right hand side here. So tomorrow there'll be a third coat if necessary to this right hand area, and I guess since I have the opportunity, the potential for a little touch up, which would be a fourth coat on the rest of everything. However, I don't want to have to do a fourth or any kind of touch up on Monday. So tomorrow's the last day I want to put up wet mud before everything's primed and painted. And then if you want to be really critical looking around at the finish at that point, and it's normally just for scuffs, dings, anything that's weirdly catching light under the actual space's lighting circumstances, you can use a little kind of anything, spackle. I like that pink dap that turns white when it's dry, and then roll it quick again with the same wall color, and that type of thing will disappear. So that's like sort of scuffs and dings type stuff. Right now we're working on just making sure we don't see any taping lumps or any of the edges between filled screw holes or from the raw board to the mud itself. That all needs to be like, here is all feathery, here I can feel that texture. So I'll be critical of that tomorrow everywhere when I'm done doing my quick sand or as I sand, to make sure that I can't feel that transition. It should be a physical lump, and it shouldn't be a textural difference where you can kind of see it here, the harshness. It's very crisp, because that's going to be where I feathered with a knife. This is actually blotchy and like visually more modeled because there's been a sanding. And then you can go too far within your sanding, and you could pick up, over here is some where you pick up the grayness and you get down to the brown of the paper, drywall paper. That's going to be too far. So you want to mitigate that. And with that power sander being my first time with that, you know, it's you're sanding a lot more area. It's farther away from you as a result of being on the end of a pole, and I'm just not as experienced. I've had a couple places where I opened up the paper just slightly, and so I was quick to apply some +3 to those areas. But anyway, that's the general idea. Let's come back tomorrow and see what we've got for final looks before being ready to prime. All right, that's looking damn good. That's a mighty fine grilling machine. Oh, why does mine look like that? Says Homer. So you can see how the light can change your perspective. Now, I'm still really pleased with this because that'll sand out. These are the things that, you know, this is a case of a poorly feathered edge, although we're getting in below where it really matters, although that will sand out. And over here on this other side, again, some boogers in this corner, but we haven't done a sanding pass through the corner yet. A little bit of pockmark there and there that I'll get. That's where I'm at today on a Friday. We'll get those couple things. First we're going to sand, okay? But by and large, when lit, just as it is now, in all the typical ways that's going to be lit, wouldn't even be a problem as it is. We are going to do under cabinet lights, but of course they're going to start at the bottom shelf and point downward, essentially right at the backsplash. The other shelves won't be lit. So, you know, there's an argument to be made for, you know, what isn't seen under the lighting conditions that are going to exist here not mattering at all. So I'm very happy with what I was able to do here with just a couple of passes. And again, sanding it out and touching a few things up slightly. Again, over here with this window, looking good. There's a couple crumbs right there. If I'm being really critical, there's a crumb thing up there. But that, now that the color of it itself hasn't changed, I'm trying to use the pole light, which is really not as it's intended. There's some pocking right there. Can you see that? That's no bueno there. Let's see if I can. Well, the camera cut off, but what I went on to say was that we're worried about texture and finishes now. The forms are here. From a sculpting perspective, we've got what we need for forms, and we're not trying to create false planes or ramp up and over lumps in tape or anything like that anymore. We're finished working on form. We're down to the questions of textural finishes and problems with gouges, nicks, scrapes, pockmarks. That all needs to be addressed right now. And then we're going to get things primed and homogenized in terms of the color, and then you can be certain of when you have problems, because you know everything's objectively the same color, so any differences in apparent color is actually a physical thing. Whereas now, differences in apparent color due to different types of mud, I have to come over and touch to establish that is in fact going to blend completely and not be, you know, a problem. And here I can tell that it won't will be a problem, or that it would be a problem, although we're below that elevation of the backsplash. Here it won't be a problem. And, you know, some different types of checks that you have to run. And then once we can see that there aren't any problems when it's one color, we can paint. And if there are a couple of problems on primer coat, I can make a little touch up here or there with that at that time. If anything shows up in the paint, it can also be touched up and painted over real quick. And so we continue to work through logical order here to the point where, you know, we're very happy with the wall. And the thing about the wall, especially in a kitchen or a bathroom, is it fades to the background because there's so many other things going on that you really don't end up being. It's when it's one big smooth wall with nothing else going on, or like a gallery type wall where you're just gonna have a couple of photographs or pieces of artwork, or there's just one or two windows. Although windows tend to backlight the wall, make it handier to hide problems. But windows on adjacent walls with sharp angles for sunset or sunrise light and stuff, then you have to start being extremely critical and try to work under those lighting situations, or just get right in there and use light aggressively to establish that under no circumstances you're going to see you know any issues with the surface that you've created. So we've got ourselves an easy project here in terms of drywalling. So much of it wasn't going to need to go any farther than this. So let's put up the last little bit of mud after we do a quick sand. We'll knock all the egregious stuff off with a quick, very high grit sand, 230 or 260 grit or whatever, 240, I don't know. Very light, not in the scheme of sandpaper, but in the scheme of drywall sanding. And then we'll just locate all of our little blemishes and try to address those with a hard pressed, tightly scraped mud pass, using it almost like spackle, and then we'll leave that to dry. And next week we'll put the color on after the primer coat, and hopefully we'll move right on to putting this thing together. Well, Tim and Holly spent the weekend and got everything cleaned up for me and masked all the windows that are doors that are going to be kind of nearby the spraying. I put my drop cloth down, which you may remember from such films or shows as Matilda the Musical. You can see all the brick silhouettes and the Crunch'em Hall stuff left over if you saw that series. But this is the next time that they're getting broken out. I'm just looking now at my dry +3 application with the harsh light at a sharp angle, which is a nice way to inspect. I got a little bit of stuff right here, just a little bit of lifting. It's hard to go around a corner. You got to be really conscious about turning the corner with the trowel, where the pressure is being applied. So like right there is a bit rough. Everything else is really good. This over here is another one that I get the light on this side. I was just over here a minute ago, but I am really content with that. And that's just a wet application, no sanding. In the corner, we've got some boogies. I just already switched the pole sander over to this triangle, so I was gonna try and get to the corner, but I'm very concerned about going backward for the first time by trying to come into this corner and creating a problem. So I might just lightly, and there's a couple turds right there. I may use it just to do regular old middle of the wall sanding again, just to get those couple spots there. I'll likely use a little sanding sponge and be real careful in the corner to knock these boogers out of here. As far as to the left and right hand corners of these windows, it's looking real nice. There's a bit of a lift right there, a bit of it's a trowel edge right there. A little bit of slightly, feathered edges that weren't feathered as well as they probably could have. So again, a quick pass with that pole sander in those places, and a little bit of hand sanding in this corner. And then we're going to set up the old Graco Ultra Max and put some primer down, but we'll come back before we get that. Well, that went all right. I ended up using a 210 tip, which is you double the first number, so that's a 4-inch fan at 12. Everything's at 12 inches from the surface. So a 210 is a 4-inch fan and a 10,000th of an inch orifice, which is really too small for, you know, latex paint and the primer specifically and stuff. But I was all set up to go, and my bigger, wider, better tip. I think I had a 4 or a 514. So more like 14 thou and a 10-inch fan. So anyway, we're going to put color up, but I went and bought a new tip for the first time since I've run this gun for a while now. It was time. They are carbide, but there's a lot of solids in these paints. And this gun makes like 2,000 PSI. And so that type of a pressure, I don't know why they call it low pressure, because it really, I don't know how that all works. So anyway, this is it'll be a 10-inch fan at 12 inches from the wall and a 17 thousandths orifice. And it's otherwise supposedly going to hold up even longer to everything. And I got to see about switching the other little piece. The gate that goes in the guard that it fits to should also be swapped out, which I think gets pressed out from back. Get all that done. But anyway, as far as I'll put the color up with that. But so you notice, anybody who paints or knows what they're looking at, it looked weird for me to make so many passes. It's because the fan was kind of narrower than I would have liked, but I was otherwise ready to rock and roll. And so we got a little bit of moisture left in that corner. But other than that, everything looks real nice as far as areas that will be seen. I guess there's a little turd thing right there. Over here, though, looking real good. These areas here. Again, I hate seeing those scratches and stuff adjacent, but as soon as we put up these upper cabinets, that stuff will all be gone. And these are the areas that we care about here. So in general, pretty easy peasy. And across the top looked real nice too. We can't forget that. So this ended up being about a gallon, but I did seal the bottom. I don't want any raw drywall, just as a best practice. I'm not going to put color everywhere I put primer because it would be a waste. So we're going to put color across the top and this whole area, but from the countertop level down, we'll skip. And I might even give up kind of halfway. I'll probably give up right about the middle of the outlets because I'm sure they're in the backsplash, but there's no reason to go across underneath them even for now. We'll just, that way they'll have more of this color to continue on in the rest of the room when they get down to painting. So let me get through the process of getting the new tip set up and loading out the new color, and we'll put that up. Well, we'll get the daylight in here today, and I did a little spackling in some areas that could be identified still with some harsh lighting as having a little bit of questionable surface texture. So I'm waiting for the spackle to dry. And I would be remiss if I didn't address those things now right before the second coat of paint, because rather than doing that after the second coat and coming back to touch up, this way I'll get as much as I can and put it to bed under the final coat of paint for right now. And there probably won't be anything that anybody feels compelled to touch up at all. This is all going to be a backlit kind of a wall for the most part from the daylight. And in the evening, the light's going to be underneath cabinets shining down more so than blaring into this corner, especially not from harsh angles. And so, you know, for the most part, I'm really happy with the finish. So we'll just leave that spackle to dry. We'll give it a light sand. I also managed to forget about the battery getting so low in the gun that it started spitting. So I had some, I don't know if you can see them here, they've been sanded, but like spitting paint on the wall that gave it some texture. So I've sanded that down a little bit, and you can see actually there, it's like darker in the center, and then there's like a halo of shiny. So that would be the difference between it still being high in that center portion, and that shiny area is where I'm not actually landing with my sanding sponge. And so if I was going to exhaustively get every one of those to go away fully, I would sit here and I would sand that abrasion resistant, high quality interior paint designed to resist scrubbing, which is where they can tout how washable something is, because you could scrub it, obviously not with a sanding sponge, but still, it's supposed to be tough. in terms of abrasion. And so if I'm trying to sand out that bump, you know, I'm going to try to rely on surface tension, pulling that fresh, heavy coat of paint that I put on there eventually across that, and effectively erasing it from everyone's perception. So we'll get everything just way more finely finished than is probably necessary by most people's standards by just looking at it, and you can see where I've applied spackle changes the finish. So I'm going to lightly sand all of that stuff, and then I'll put the second coat up, and then we'll call this video for drywall and paint complete. And then, as you could probably tell, we're going to kick things off with the next video, setting cabinets, fixing up the heat ducts, hooking up the sink, demoing out that old kitchen once they can get in here and do a few things in here. We're going to move the dust wall over as discussed, and this is going to turn into more job site. We're going to get the flooring out of here after this kitchen is gone, and we're going to start expanding the scope of the project beyond simply kitchen to get this area more finished in, get that new living room, dining room, entryway kind of more finished, as well as continuing to ratchet up, get the stone tops placed on the cabinet boxes. We've got some lighting changes to make in the ceiling. We've got some shiplap we're going to do on the ceiling, and then we'll put that stuff in. Then we'll have the fixtures to drop in. We've got the tile backsplash to pick. And, you know, we got to see how the lights under the cabinets ended up working. We've got to clad this post in finished lumber. We've got a couple switch changes to make. We got to clean the drywall mud off of that switch. We got to get the outlets, covers and stuff on. Like I say, the faucet will be in, so we'll also get the pot filler, and we'll park the stove over here. We're going to get the hood framed out and working so they can cook. The refrigerator will come in place here. And so I will say there's some things about this project that I wish we could have gone to the next level with. I'm sure the homeowners could have, you know, gotten down with going to the next level, but it's a cost thing. So we've got kind of ordinary stainless oven, ordinary stainless refrigerator from their old kitchen, stainless front, I believe, to the dishwasher, despite the fact that now with a really high-end kitchen, you end up with some enamel stuff again in a lot of cases, or some, you know, looks like vintage but new style cooktops and some really swanky stuff. But this thing is modulated right along the middle ground for the most part. I would have liked to push this area up as a big shed dormer and put a super tall window in here and finish the sides of the dormer with wood, you know, and there's a bunch of things that we could have gone even bigger and grander with. So let's not get our hopes up too high here, but I am trying to maximize the return on investment from a design perspective. I'm trying to maximize their final product, even though it's a sort of a budget kitchen reno at, you know, easily six figures really, but still a budget kitchen reno these days. And so I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I hope it wasn't too boring making just a drywall finishing and painting video. I never know what anybody wants to see. If this is killing you, I'm trying to add to my backstory video series and talk a little bit more about where I came from, how I learned to do some of this stuff, what I've done prior to this. We've got finished lumber that Tim and his dad are going to clad the outside corner of this with. And I think it is going to be, I mean, it's certainly nicer if you're going to watch the video about my place and you see how our kitchen compares to something like this. This is a far cry nicer than anything that I've got personally. So I'm not taking the piss out of this. I'm just saying that, you know, we'd like to go even above and beyond this level someday. But for right now, this is what it takes. And if you're working on your own project and you've got structural changes to make and, you know, you're moving plumbing and electricity, hopefully this series will help you get that done, help you get through, you know, your drywall project, make it more digestible and feasible, and see how you could kind of handle it in and around, you know, living in the rest of your home while you do it. Not quite sure who watches. Not quite sure if you just find me to be a silly goose. But in any case, I'm glad you're here, and I can't wait to show you the cabinets coming back in and getting this place looking more like the design has looked for months now, right? So let's hurry up and get this part done so we can move on to the next. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you.